If Kelly, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, sir, I do. Member Hoy?
Here.
Member Stapleton?
Here.
Member Varney?
Here.
Member Gonzalez? Oh, he's waiting to get into the room. We'll go to Chair Bennett.
Here.
And we will wait. He's connecting to audio. We'll say he's here, if that
Okay.
works for everybody. Okay.
Okay, very good. Approval of minutes.
I move
Anyone
approval of
object
the
to
minutes.
the? Okay, there we go. Got a
Second.
motion. Anyone object? Okay, minutes are adopted. We'll go to public comment. Right now, I have one person signed up, Phil Carver.
Hello, thank you, members of the committee and Mayor Bennett. I'm here to talk about putting a bucket in the bond measure for something like $15 million to eventually implement something like the Salem Bike Vision. I realize that the Salem Bike Vision is not fully defined yet and would require a public comment and engineering design and a lot of other things. But I think that basic concept merits a bucket, much like some of the other buckets of similar size that are in the current bond measure, particularly related to sidewalks. And I think there's two buckets for sidewalks. And I think this kind of protected bike paths will really encourage people to use their bikes more. And currently, I rode my bike from South Salem to downtown for several years, and I rode on Sunnyside, and then Commercial, and then 12th Street, and it's a little hairy for even me. And I think that a well-designed bike path that had more separation, like cones, would really make it feel much safer, and people would be much more likely to use it. And the more people use bikes, the less congested roads will be. That benefits everyone, and it reduces air pollution, carbon pollution, and I think is a substantial element to meeting the council's goal of a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, Virginia.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming down, Phil. It's always great to hear from you. I really appreciate all your public testimony throughout this whole process. And what I wanted to say is, that's exactly what I hope to do here, is to just get some money set aside for bike lanes and protected bike lanes. The bike vision is something that I'm flattered has had so much public engagement and excitement about it, but it doesn't exist yet. It's not a thing. And so at this phase in my dream of protected bike lane infrastructure here in Salem, this is what I think you've kind of nailed it right on the head. We just need to set aside a little money for this project, and hopefully in the future we can adopt something like this at the council. And the transportation master plan update is coming up, so the timing is perfect, where we're just going to open up that conversation and have it with the community. So thank you so much for coming down and supporting this idea, and for advocating for more active transportation in Salem. So thanks for coming down.
Thank you. And my comments represent the views of 350 Salem. And I'm Phil Carver, for the record. Sorry.
Okay. Do we have anyone else, any other members of the public out there that want
No.
to speak? No. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, let's have an update on public opinion and community research from DHM. Mr. Worth, start with you.
You're on mute.
I think John Horvick will kick this off. Sorry about that.
Oh, great. Okay, John, go ahead.
Well, thank you for having us back again. Looking forward to be able to work with you in the coming days and weeks. So we have an opportunity to go back to John Horvick with DHM Research, I should just say. senior vice president there. We've worked with Salem on a number of projects over the years and recently. We have an opportunity to go back to talk to folks about the bond measure or potential bond measure. I think at this point, part of what I want to get out of this, what I need to hear today is sort of where things stand. There's different opportunities about how to use the next public opinion research tool. One is to test, see where voters are at on a specific package, if we get to that point, and then understand from them better about what are the things they're most excited about in that package, how to talk to them about that package as this moves forward, or if there's not a decision what the package would be, to understand, to potentially go back to voters and give them some different scenarios, and understand what are the things that are really going to motivate them, be supportive of, and what things may be less so. So I think the next stage is dependent on sort of where this conversation lands and where it's at. Initially, I think the hope was to test something specific. And if that's where things stand, we'll have the opportunity to do that. But if there's additional research that's needed before that, then that's an opportunity too.
John, do you want me to share the presentation?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So we went back and forth on this, but do you want to lead this or do you want me to?
You.
All right.
Yeah.
So Libby and I and Clark before the meeting wanted to just ground us again about what we know so far. And so we've had an opportunity on this bond to do a couple rounds of research. One was focus groups back in September, and then another round of survey research. And just to ground everybody again and the clear themes have been to this point. One is just what are the top issues? Top issues where we ask directly or we ask open-ended and people can ask anything they want. And those are really homelessness and crime. Homelessness has been a rising concern for voters in Salem and really across Oregon for the last number of years. Crime is something that has increased both in Salem and other parts of the community really in the last couple of years. But those are the top issues. And so when we're thinking about framing this issue for voters, one of the things that they're going to be asking themselves is, how does this address my top concerns or not? And there's lots of different things in this package that maybe get there, and some just acknowledgments where maybe they don't get there, and thinking about how to communicate with them. On the package itself, like again in different rounds of research, the thing that just is like pops to folks is like they start with some hesitancy. Voters start with hesitancy in part because that they're imagining a new increase in their tax rates. That this, if you couldn't get these good and important things for the community without asking me for money above and beyond what I'm already paying. And once we're able to talk to voters about the fact that this is an opportunity to get these benefits without increasing your tax rates, I mean, that's really where support jumps. And there are specific projects that they want, but knowing that they're not going to have to pay more than they are now to get them is really a real relief for them. And something to really keep in mind as we're structuring the package, like keeping tax rates at their current levels is one of the strongest benefits to what they see going forward. In the survey, as well as in the focus groups, people have some questions initially, and then when we can talk to them about what the types of projects that are going to be funded, get more information about them, that also increases support. And of course, voters do want projects to align with their priorities. So homelessness is one we talked about. Public safety is another. Transportation is something that's not on this chart, but is also an important concern to voters, and something that they're looking for in alignment as well. And so in the survey, we asked a question about the bond measure and whether or not they'd be likely to support something like we described or not. It starts at 49% support. That's a pretty middling number, to be honest with you. Typically, pollsters like me like to say you want to start with north of 60%, because if there's a competitive campaign, if there's organized opposition, support tends to fall as you get closer to election day rather than rise. And so you want to start something above 50%, so you give yourself some room to work down if that occurs. So 49%, that's something to keep in mind. But this is what's important, is as soon as we tell voters that this is not going to increase their tax rates, then it jumps to 60%. That's even before we get into real discussion about what all the good things that this bond can buy for the community. So then it does reach that 60% number, which we're glad to see. And then in terms of priorities, okay, we gave people a number of different things that this package could include, and then asked them, gosh, is that a priority for you or not? Is it a high priority for you or not? And so Libby's put this together just to clearly look down to see what tested well. That doesn't mean that something that doesn't test as a high priority that we're saying shouldn't be in the package, but if it's going to be in the package, let's be clear-eyed about what the impact that might be on voter support, but also thinking about how to communicate that's value, and then what to prioritize in communications as well. But number one, and really in a tier by itself, is maintaining and repairing existing streets, bridges, and sidewalks. Right, 73%. So that's a very high priority. The next one down is 58% saying it's very high priority, which is also transportation related. Build new streets and sidewalks where they can reduce congestion and improve safety. So the top two, and really repairing and maintaining existing streets, bridges, and sidewalks are transportation related. The third is provide land for affordable housing and shelters. Now that ties directly to the concerns about homelessness, right? We know that's a big concern. I will acknowledge that also had the most intense sort of low priority in the survey, and sort of popped in a couple different ways in the survey that also has some intense feelings maybe on the other side as well. So there's definitely, most voters would like to see activity around that, and there's a small group of voters who maybe feel differently, but it does show up with the intensity a little bit more. Next is replacing fire engines and firefighting equipment, upgrading the city's data and computer systems, which is below 50% for the high priority. Parks, purchasing land for future stations, and upgrading the Civic Center to meet current earthquake safety standards. So it's a pretty clear sort of sense of the priorities. We ask these questions in some different ways to try to get validation. If you ask things some different ways, sometimes some nuances emerge. And here was another exercise where we asked people, hey, you got a budget, you got $100 you can spend on some different things. Where would you put the money? And again, what we see is streets and sidewalk improvements, that transportation related stuff be the number one. So people gave $29.80 of the $100 budget to that. Fire protection does rise a little bit more here. And so $24.90 in that budget. Then we see cybersecurity, parks improvements, and earthquake safety. So again, transportation related number one. We didn't include homelessness in this exercise, so that's, take that into some consideration. But I think it's pretty clear what at least some of what their priorities are. And then again, I would say, letting people know, creating a package that keeps current tax rates at their current levels is really something that's crucial for voters to be aware of.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you, John, for this information. Did you attempt to move the needle at all on these specific topics, like you did on the overall? Like once they knew that there was no tax increase, the percentage increase. Did you do that on individual things, like by giving them more information?
We gave them a little bit of information. There are different types of survey approaches. We did not do like really strong message testing in this particular survey because we were trying to understand what voter priorities were in terms of creating a package to help inform your committee thinking about that. We weren't trying to sell the package. Now, in the next research project, I presume that we'll want to test something specific, 300, whatever the dollar amount is, a set of projects that are going to go with it, ask that question with it's real. It's not hypothetical. It could include this, it might include that, but a specific thing, get the response, and then come up with some messages that sort of, really sort of try to drill down into what are the set of information that is going to be most persuasive to folks. That's really the goal of the next survey. It wasn't the goal of the first survey.
Thank you. One follow-up to that.
Yeah.
On the earthquake piece, the fact that it was a low dollar amount, do you think that maybe like, because I received the survey and filled it out and I put it as a low dollar amount, but not because it was a low priority, but because I thought it would cost less than those other things?
No, that's why we ask questions in different ways, and that's perfectly
Okay.
reasonable interpretation as well. That people might think that just, hey, you know, this isn't the highest dollar thing in the package. But I think if we look at the multiple pieces of data that show that transportation is the number one priority and where they put the most dollars is something we got to pay attention to.
Definitely. Thank you.
Counselor Varney?
Thank you. And thank you, John, for the information. I'm kind of trying to play catch up here. As a follow-up to what Member Hoy said, my question was for fire protection, was there any background provided at all? Because I think folks, when they hear the word fire protection, they think it could be trucks, it could be stations, it could be equipment, whatever. Was there anything leading into that?
In some of the questions, we did talk about need for fire truck equipment, their age. Most people are not going to start from an aware, like just whether we're doing a survey or you're out talking to the community, you're not going to be starting from a sense of awareness of what a fire department needs, what its conditions of its equipment is, how old it is, how often it's going to be replaced. So I will just acknowledge like that sort of equipment side is probably going to be a communication challenge. What we have found in other contexts is being able to talk to voters about things like response times. Is really motivating for them to understand how they're directly impacted by the investment. Are they going to be able to get to my home if I have an emergency quickly? And that consistently being able to make that connection with voters is more powerful than saying things like, you know, they've reached the end of their life because we bought them 15 years ago.
Okay, but for the survey information you just provided, fire protection was just a general category?
No, we followed up with some information about, we asked about fire protection in different, we're showing you very few results in this little deck here, Council Varney. But we did give people a little bit more information in some other questions. So it wasn't completely absent context.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Counselor Stapleton?
Thank you, and thanks again, John. My question is about when you went to asking people to put money towards this idea, you know, importance, how much money would they put towards it? What was the thinking about not including affordable housing? And then how do we as a council, you know, take in that information and move forward? You know, it seemed like in previous questions, it was the number one issue. But then when we get to this exercise, it's not included. So it's hard for me to understand, you know, what to take away from this and how to treat it.
Well, it's one question of a larger set of questions in the survey. So the survey, I can't remember how many questions it was, but probably close to 40. And so there are different elements here. I don't believe affordable housing, from my understanding, and you all can correct me, I don't believe that affordable housing is the question either. It is purchasing land that could be used for affordable housing. I think we made a choice that that's a low dollar figure relative to transportation, parks, the other sorts of things in there. So we were trying to get a sense of those big dollar packages, where would they put things? And then in other places in the survey, we also asked about purchasing the land for affordable housing.
Thanks.
John, did you see any deal killers? Did you have anything show up that looked like it would cause us problems in what you've surveyed so far?
Not deal killers in the sense that, like, if you spend money on this, that's going to kill it. I think what we see in this data, and we heard in the focus groups, if it's not balanced towards what their priorities are, if they don't feel like it's going to make an improvement in their daily lives, and they're going to have we got some information here about what they're looking for, like the mix, the package itself could potentially, you know, be misaligned from where voters are at. Certainly a deal killer would be increasing tax rates. Like that would be a deal killer.
Okay.
That would be the one that I would sort of call out. Like, we didn't ask about it directly. We do see the big bump when people know that tax rates are going to stay the same, but I think we can make some inferences if tax rates went up, that would be a real problem.
Where did you see any misalignment then? Did you pick
well,
up?
that's really for you to judge, not me, but the sort of thing that I will just, you know, you could push back on this, you can make your own judgments.
Sure.
Are the transportation dollars really aligned to what voters say that they prioritize the highest? And I don't know how to make that judgment based. I don't know what the final package is, and there's obviously lots of things you're trying to balance, but That's the one that I sort of would ask myself if I were in your shoes.
The on the transportation, was it streets, bridges, and sidewalks?
Yep.
How is that framed? How does that, is it specifically, we're going to fix your streets and?
Yeah. So we asked it twice. We asked a couple different ways. One is about maintaining and repairing existing, and one was about building some new. It's maintaining and repairing is where people really gravitate towards, and that's sort of one, take care of what we have first.
Okay.
If there were signature projects, that dealt with congestion, and could be dealt with the dollar amount that we're sort of dealing with, and I think that'd be attractive to folks. We do hear in the focus groups, and we do hear in open-ended, information in the survey. I'll just, I know it's not on the table, but I'll just say it, the bridge over the Willamette River is that comes up, and there's all sorts of issues with that and its cost and whether it's appropriate in this bond, but it's just it comes
Ain't
up.
gonna happen. What about Route 5? Yeah, it's too late now.
Yeah. The one other thing is, it's not a deal breaker, but I'll just say again, I said it here today, and I said it in the previous presentation I gave, with regards to the question around purchasing land for affordable housing, that is strong majority support,
Right.
As a priority in the community. But it's also the one thing that we asked about that had the greatest number of people saying that's a very low priority. And when there's a couple other times we asked about housing that, about 20% of folks, it looks like in the community, are going to resist that in ways that maybe that they wouldn't resist some of the other sorts of things we asked about. It's a minority, but potentially it's gosh, so if you see something consistent, and it's around 20%, maybe that's a big enough group to organize, that's something just to, be looking out for and understanding what their concerns are and managing for.
Did you pick up any specific projects of any sort that came up that caught your attention, whether pro or negative, either way? But, boy, if they don't aside from the bridge, but on other parts of the program, or did it get that where they just brought it up?
We didn't. Well, maybe this isn't answering your question directly, Mayor, but the only other, the purchasing land for future fire stations is, that's going to be a tough sell. Unfortunately, because I know many of you, work there or are there on a regular basis, and we've asked about this in previous work that goes back years, the difficulty of convincing voters to make investments in the civic center, city hall. I understand the necessity for it, the need for it, but just acknowledging that that's just not a priority for voters.
Would it be worth it in the future in talking about it as a kind of life safety? That's kind of how the library was pitched.
Yeah, probably understanding that it's what's important. To be somewhat direct in perhaps channeling some voter cynicism, spending more money on city workers just to work in an office. That's not a surprise to anybody. And of course, the safety of those people matter. And so it's talking about it in those terms without, it's that balance between, without trying to make them feel like you're trying to scare them into saying yes to something. But but that's not where voters' priorities are. That's part of the reality.
The other one that I think was lower than some of the others is the cybersecurity question. What did you find in that?
It is a lower priority. My sense is that you're not going to get much pushback from it either. People are, I think, in my conversations, sort of generally where sorts of these issues come up with individuals, is that they understand that there's a risk. They're certainly hearing news stories about communities or businesses and have their own personal stories. My email was hacked a couple of weeks ago. I have my own sort of personal example that I can relate to. I don't think it's an issue of people are voting no on this. It's just not going to get them out to the polls to vote yes for it either. So I would think of it as much as in terms of how do you talk about it, be able to answer people's questions. I do think that talking more about cybersecurity, protecting community members' private data, making government services more efficient for them is much more important than talking about any sort of technical things that you're going to buy or serve it. The specifics voters aren't concerned about. So it's emphasizing the protection that they're going to get as community members, the improvements that they're going to have in their interactions with their local government. Those things are positive. But again, that's like the third thing you talk about, because what they're really looking for is those top priority issues. But again, I don't think people are voting against it because of those issues. It's just, not a strong motivator to vote yes.
Right. And on the transportation, the kind of thing to stress is maintenance of the existing system.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're telling us? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there may be signature projects in key communities you'd want to highlight when you're talking to them, but sort of a broad messaging, maintaining, repairing what the existing system is where voters' priorities are.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
Mhm.
John, am I correct in saying that because you talked about a direct nexus between what impacts their daily lives, so the repair of something that they might find problematic, like say driving down Center Street is kind of a challenge with the potholes and poor pavement quality, and I can see that in my head about that being repaired, as opposed to something brand new that we haven't had, and we've gotten by without it anyway, whatever it is.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
And that is, as you can imagine, consistent across time and across communities. That's sort of a truism with what people are looking for.
Did you check on any of the specific projects that were listed in the bond measure? Did you?
No, we talked more in generalities. Like that would be something.
Okay.
It's a potential thing to explore in the next round of research. Like if when we know what those specific things are, trying to what we're gonna have to make some choices. The survey can't ask about everything, but if we make a determination that understanding what signature projects are, they're going to motivate voters that would be something worth considering exploring.
Yeah, Chris.
Thanks. I have a question, I think probably for staff and probably for John. So we're getting ready to finalize our recommendation to City Council, this committee is, but we don't have the benefit of having tested some of these specific projects. So I'm wondering if we make our final recommendation now, and then it goes to City Council, and then you do some testing and we realize, oh, we got the mix wrong, or we got something not quite right, and we don't have the opportunity to fix that. I'm just wondering on the timing, do we hold off on our final recommendation until we do some testing, or what are the thoughts on that?
Councillor Hoy, to answer your question, we are planning to make sure that the rest of council is confident and comfortable with your recommendation before we do polling. We would then come back with the results to this committee, and you could make adjustments or shift some of what you might be proposing in the measure. And then we have until we're aiming, our last opportunity is August 8th for the City Council to refer the measure. So we have some time to adjust based on the responses we get out of the next public opinion research survey. But we don't have, it turns out it's less than 4 months at this point before we have to refer the measure. So the referring the measure piece is really critical because staff have a smaller lily pad from which we can speak and answer questions. So referring the measure has to happen no later than August 8th, and we can adjust and pivot based on messaging and response that we get out of the public opinion research.
So that's what Courtney and I have talked about, and that's certainly what I've been supportive of from just a public opinion and my experience working with communities and issues like this in the past.
Okay, anything else? All right. Thank you very much. Now what? Clark, who's up next? Kristen? You're muted.
Mr. Mayor, we can move into the next area of the requested options for bond package.
The options, okay. I just wanted to make sure we're done with this portion where we have public opinion, community research. Is there anything we haven't heard about then?
Courtney, are we missing anything?
No, we are not. And just as a quick reminder, we have the packet from February 18th meeting contains all of the findings from both portions of this work that we've just provided a quick little summary of. As we were getting closer into deciding on the package, we we noticed that maybe we could just revisit a couple of key points and to help ground you as you make this recommendation. So thank you for your time. We can shift now, Josh, to the package itself.
Great.
Excellent, thank you. So I hope all of you had a chance to read the memo. What we thought would be helpful is to come back with a recommendation for the committee to respond to for reductions in the package that gets you into the 300 million. And we're happy to walk through any of those. One in particular that might be helpful is the Marine Drive portion. I believe Brian's prepared with maps to walk through what that looks like if we want to start there.
But I would like that, definitely.
Brian,
Okay,
could you walk us through that?
absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Brian Martin, City Engineer. I'm going to share my screen. And of course, now I don't see it. All right. I apologize for that. I'm going to try this one more time.
Brian, we can come back to you if that would be helpful.
Yeah, maybe so, Josh. I don't. Oh, I have it now. There we go. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So what we had in the original submittal for Marine Drive was the complete project, which starts at the north end at Riverbend Road and then works its way down all the way to Glen Creek Road.
Right.
That cost was $47 million. And of course, we were over pretty significantly by, about that amount with where we're trying to aim for with the $300 million. After hearing, hearing from the public the last couple of meetings and talking among staff, what had been proposed is to actually, and I'm going to blow this up a little bit, to actually hold off this north phase between Harrod and Riverbend for a later time and actually start the project at Harrod and follow it all the way down south to a connection that would occur with North Fifth Street. And that connection then would cut across here and connect to North Fifth, which then takes us down to Tabin, and there's Cornucopia Street. It gets you down to the Ross. There's access down here for the rest of the main business district in that area. And so that would, by choosing that alternative, it would also eliminate this connection down here to Glen Creek. We would consider that, again, a future phase outside of this bond measure, maybe a future bond measure, but at least it would provide us a connection at the north end with all these apartment complexes all the way down here to North Fifth in the business district to relieve a lot of the, well, at least the congestion from these high density areas off of Wallace Road. What we would also propose is that because we own this property here and having a bike and pedestrian connection to Wallace Marine Park, that we would, even though we'd stop the project here at North Fifth, we would carry a bike connection across our property over to Wallace Road, over to Wallace Marine Park. And then that would provide a link, of course, down to the Minnow or the Union Street Railroad Bridge into downtown. By doing that, we eliminate about $17 million for the southern leg and another $8 million for this upper leg. And we'd be proposing a project of about $23 million. So it's a $24 million savings from the total cost of the overall project.
I have a quick question, Brian.
Sure.
So I know that when we looked at the project list in the beginning, we had, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 projects. And we're talking about splitting up this project into, 3 different phases. So are different bits and pieces of this project still on this project list, but in different priorities, or are they nowhere on this project list?
We have not, with the project list, unless Josh has condensed it, we had the 47 million for the total project. And what we've done is we've just looked at how we could trim the costs and still meet the goal and the objective of a local access for people to get them from the business area around Ross up to the northern part of West Salem. So it is not broken out separately on the list, Josh, unless you did that. I think we were just showing it as a $23 million project, which by nature reduces 24 million from our overage.
Okay.
But I think to Councilor Stapleton's point is we could have phase 2 and phase 3 on the list in priority 2 or 3 or something. We just wouldn't have them as a priority 1 part of the project. Is that what you're asking, Councilor?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm asking. Thank you.
We can absolutely do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we don't want to forego or foreclose on the idea of phases 2 and 3. We just don't want to make them in top priority.
Okay, we can do that.
Have you tested this then? How did that become priority 1, Brian? Was it based on public comment? How'd that arrive?
So, the primary objective is to provide this connection from north to south. And you can get that with this middle segment. Doing the northern part without connecting to the south gets you nothing. And we know we need to get people down to this business area. So it's a way to get there. Really, we've just in what we've heard from the meetings, from the testimony that has happened and some discussions with the members of this committee is kind of how we arrived at this as a possibility.
Does this still meet the objective of being kind of the alternative to Wallace Marine, or has it been now reduced to it's easy to get from this apartment complex to Ross?
It will provide the local access, which is what this project was intentionally intended for. Really to provide this local access without all these people that live on the east side of Wallace Road having to use Wallace Road to get down to the business area here. It was never really intended to be a bypass for people to skip Wallace Road and just get to the north end of town. It was really primarily a local access.
It was not a reliever then. It wasn't designed to relieve Wallace Road of some of its traffic.
Right, not for the through traffic on Wallace Road. It was really to let those folks continue to use Wallace Road, but get a lot of these local folks off of Wallace Road, which in turn would relieve some congestion on Wallace Road.
Well, this will be one I hope we test. I'll be real curious how folks in West Salem respond to this. If we have limited it to the point that we've created a problem for ourselves in terms of voter support of the bond over in West Salem. So I hope we can get a test on it right away. Yeah, Mickey.
Thank you. First question, does the 23 million include the bike connector or not?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And it's my understanding, this is for local access, but there are a lot of places along there that will then be connected. And also in the future, there are going to be more businesses and more affordable housing along there. And so that's why it's really important for us to have it. And I know the Neighborhood Association is in support of the current design.
Of this design, Mickey?
Yes, the new one, the connector from 5th up to Harrod at this point.
Okay.
And I can zoom in or zoom out or stop sharing. So let me know when you've seen it.
I think we're done.
Okay.
Okay. What else, Josh?
So the next one we reduced is the Pringle Creek Path. What we're trying to do there is actually fund part of it with urban dollars at a future point. And Kristen can speak to it more directly if you're interested, but we just need to wait until South Waterfront has enough increment to fund that other half, and then we can do that project. And it was really just to reduce the scope, still leave it in there so we can get it done sooner, but to solve for that $300 million.
300.
The total bond.
Okay, Virginia.
Thank you. So it went from 7 point something to 3 point something, which is great. Can you tell us what we're getting for the 3 point, like what will be what will we get in this bond, and what will we have to wait for until those that system kind of builds up over there on South Riverfront?
So we'd wait until we had the whole funding available to do the project. So it would be at the later portion of the bond if the South Waterfront has that much increment available.
So we're bringing in about 450-ish thousand in increment, and that's escalating slightly over time. The bulk of the increment is deferred because it's tied up with the South Block Apartments MUTIP. That's going to expire in the 2027-28 timeframe. At that point, we will have the accumulated increment over the next few years, and then more increment coming online. And then we should be able to move forward in that 27, 28, 29 timeframe to complete that project. And that's the primary project within that urban renewal area. And then we'd be looking towards closing down that urban renewal area.
Okay. Any further questions? Yeah, Chris.
Along those same lines, what's the timeline on the Fisher Road deferment to SDCs? When might we have sufficient SDCs to cover that project?
And I'll defer to Public Works on that question. We're not quite there, but the Fisher Road Park development, we removed the project from the bond with the anticipation of funding it with SDCs. So I'll let Brian answer.
I can't tell you right now, Counselor. I do see it fitting within the 10-year period. It probably would not be within the first 5. It'd probably be somewhere between year 5 and 10.
Thank you.
Okay.
The other items, River Road South Slide Mitigation, we removed that project, the $20 million. And, as you guys were speaking, the priority 1, 2, 3, right now we're really talking in or out of the bond. So it is below the line at this point. So it's moved into priority 2.
Are there any alternative funding routes we could be looking at on this thing? I mean, does the state have anything to do with this? Where else could we go?
So we're always looking for other funding sources, if it's from the state or federal government. This large project, I'm not sure about the likelihood of other funding. Peter might be able to speak to it more directly.
Does the slide mitigation portion of it put it in line for anything special, Peter? I'm just curious.
I don't think there is mitigation money out there, but not to the size that we would need to address this thing.
Okay. So your solution at this point will be just heavier netting, or what will your?
Yeah, we'll do some additional netting, and we'll keep cleaning it up as it slides. There's just not a whole lot. That whole hillside is slowly eroding, and so we're managing the impact. But the solution is to do some kind of substantial retaining wall. Very similar to what you see on I-5 as you get into downtown.
Right.
Portland. It would be that kind of project, but that's we're talking tens of millions. So
yeah, well, 20.
Yeah. 2 tens.
Two tens. Okay. Councilor Barney, you're.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute there. Okay, thank you. Although this is on the side of the road, it's to keep stuff from coming down on the road. So is this eligible for gas tax funding?
I don't know. Maybe, but we don't have enough. So I guess I can hedge because it really doesn't matter. We don't have it in gas tax. So we do use gas tax to mitigate the impacts, for the netting and that kind of stuff. But to do a full project like that, I guess ODOT used federal money, so for their project up there. So I presume that it would be.
Thank you.
Councilor Hoy.
And do we have an estimate for what it would cost? You had referenced previously rerouting River Road in that area. Do we have an estimate for what that might cost?
I don't know. Do we, Brian? I don't think so.
No, we don't have an estimate for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, the next reductions were a series of parking lot improvements at Orchard Heights Park, Wallace Marine Park, and Cascade Gateway Park. And I'll just
Now,
pause.
Fisher Road, I want to make sure I understand what's going on. You just skipped over it. Did you
Sorry.
feel it's answered at this point? What's going on?
Yeah, we touched on it, but what our intention would be to fund it within the same 10-year period with system development charges.
Okay. But it'd be within a 10-year period.
Yeah, within the same period as the bond.
Okay, Councilor Barney?
So the certain money that we have in Parks SDCs, which is almost 1.2 million. So that's already allocated to other projects, obviously.
I'm sorry, which 1.2 million are you referencing?
The SDC monies that are currently unspent right now for parks.
I can circle back to clarify what that is. I'm not.
Josh, I could go ahead and add it. I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
The counselor had asked for how much SDCs we had collected and what we had available. And I believe we supplied that information, and that would have probably shown an unspecified in the parks fund of about 1.2 million. I would say though that those unspecified contingencies are there to also cover projects that are already funded that may go over because bids come in higher and different things happen over time. We're seeing a lot of inflation and projects coming in at much higher cost than what we were originally estimated. So now if things come in on budget or under budget, then that money would continue to accumulate and, could be used for some of these projects.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't frame that. I just assumed everybody, both Josh and Brian were on board with it. So I apologize for not introducing that as well.
Okay. Did you get the answer you wanted?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure that I understand this right. So we are deciding to fund other park projects and not Fisher Road with bond money and instead wait for SDCs for Fisher, but yet make investments in parks that are already developed. I guess I'm trying to understand this. I know that Fisher Road Park development was really important to equity in that area of town with parks. And so I'm trying to understand, I guess, the reasoning behind not funding this project. Are those SDCs not available for some of the other parks? Does that make sense? Could we flip-flop that to make sure that the funding for Fisher Road Park development is in the bond? And yet maybe we can wait for some of the other things. Am I asking this question correctly?
Yeah, so let me jump in and then Brian can finish up. So a lot of the projects that are in the bond are absolutely not SDC eligible. So any kind of repairs, improvements to existing parks, those kinds of things are not eligible, where Fisher Road being a brand new development is SDC eligible. So that's the balancer there. Now, council can always decide, what goes first or second is absolutely council's decision. Every year when the CIP comes up, you can reallocate, the SDC monies, but but what's in the bond and what's, is not, for the most part, those kinds of rehabs projects are not SDC eligible. So Brian, tack on.
Okay, I think you nailed it. I don't know if I have anything else to add.
No, that really helps. Thank you very much.
So Peter, for Councilor Stapleton, if she's interested in affecting that, when the CIP shows up in front of the council during its budget process, that's where we would get a shot at that. Is that correct?
That is the perfect time to see what's the list of parks projects that are planned for funding over the next 5 years and which ones are being funded by SDCs. And if the council wants to move stuff around, that is absolutely your annual opportunity to do that.
Do you have an equity lender applying to these so that you can explain the equity issues involved in these various parks projects? And
Yeah, I don't have that at my fingertips, but I think.
no,
the
but
staff-
I mean, at that time, will you be able to?
Yes, the staff does look at that, and I think all of that is vetted through.
Okay.
Councilor Varney was just on SPRAB, so I think all of that funding is vetted through SPRAB as well to make sure
Okay.
that everything is
Okay.
reviewed carefully by somebody other than the staff.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So moving past Fisher Road Park, we have 3 parking lots that are being reduced. And I should clarify, so these park projects, it's not money being used in parks. We actually ended up increasing streets and I'll switch to the graph here in a minute and you can see the distribution.
Okay.
Just to clarify how things landed. So three parking lots removed, the pavement R&R at Edgewater, and then the signal replacement at Portland Road and Lana Avenue, and then the Orchard Heights Dog Park.
So, Josh, when you say removed on these parking lots, will there still be gravel parking lots available? I mean, will there still be space, or what's that mean? It won't be paved, but will it be available for people who are bringing their kids to the park?
Yeah, I apologize for the confusion. We're not removing the parking lots. We're just removing the project from the bond. So everything that's currently at the parks will remain in its current state.
Okay, so it's no change from what you've got now.
Right.
That's what it means. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Councilor Stapleton?
Thank you. On the last item, removing the dog park from the West Salem park, do we have any additions? Did we move that to North Salem like we had talked about at our last meeting? That was something that I was interested in. Or are we just cutting that, $500,000 from the budget and not putting in a dog park in North Salem?
So we just removed projects to get to the 300 million. So we didn't add anything else anywhere else. So the project list is just like you saw it at your previous meeting.
Okay. Very good.
And if I may, I'll show you the end result.
Okay.
So where you land, and this was outlined in the memo, but just to make sure you guys are all on the same page, these items in yellow, you guys moved those last week. Streets and sidewalks, it lands at just over 157 million. Parks at 28.3 million, and then the future fire stations at 14 million. So we really, to solve for that 300 million, we made some adjustments to streets and sidewalks and then the parks.
That's amazing. You are really close to 300 million. That's pretty stunning work.
Thank you. I'd help.
That is really good.
Can I come up with a $61,000 project?
Yeah. Who gets last shot at this? Hoy, you want to take a run at it, man?
Definitely.
And we can add that to a bucket, so it actually rounds it out nicely. So,
okay, very good.
Please do. I would support keeping that right at 300 million.
Yeah, keep it right at 300 to the extent you can is, I think, would be important to us that we take that number in as a round number.
Yeah, understood.
Good, thank you. Councilor Stapleton?
Thank you. In the previous meeting, we had talked about, kind of shifting our thinking from individual projects to kind of buckets. Mm-hmm. Did staff go through that exercise to see, we have the pedestrian bucket, we have, the big projects, like Marine Drive or the Gilchrist, those types of things. Like, how did we do that exercise? And if not, can we get that information? I'm really curious to see that.
What I have for you, so the detail's still here, but what it's done is it's rolled up by category. So this is the parks projects. You can see it all on one page, the 28 million we just talked about. And it's rolled up to athletic courts, dog parks, parking lots, path and trails, playgrounds, restroom shelters, and sports fields. So you just see the total number there. It makes it really simplistic. What we don't want to lose is the detail. So the detail is still there. It's just rolled up so you can really see it at that category level.
Okay. What about other?
Other?
Take us to the other categories is what he's saying, Josh. Show us the same thing on the other categories.
Yeah, the same thing for the other categories. We didn't go through the same process for streets. We feel like the specificity there is really important so people know where the projects are. There's that balance between knowing what's in the bond and having just a blank category. So parks, even here, it still lists the parks that are being improved with the total dollar amount. So it would allow some flexibility between different categories if some come in higher or lower.
Okay. Do we retain a substantial amount of flexibility in this, or are we getting ourselves pretty well tied down to project-specific allocations? I'm trying to remember how that worked.
So again, it's going to be that balance between making sure voters know what's included in the bond and flexibility. I think Peter could speak to this more on the last bond, how that was important.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. If first and foremost, if the bond, if we end up with a good sale, so we end up with a premium and that kind of thing, then there's extra money to add to the 61,000, for example. The engineers, the project managers never like us to propose spending that too early. Yeah, because if projects come in higher, we want to deliver what we've promised. But as we start to deliver projects and for example, in the 2008 bond, we hit the market. Terrible for the economy, great for us, right? There was a horrible recession, and everything was cheaper. So we ended up doing 40 more projects, and that's where the flexibility came in. So within the bounds of if there was money, this bond is very big. The transportation bond was about transportation, but as long as we were doing transportation projects, then we were able to do that many more, and the council was able to deliver more opportunities or expand. The other side of the coin is if we have a bad bond sale, we hit the market at the wrong time, we don't get much or any premium, inflationary pressures continue, then the flexibility really reduces. And that's really the difference. So where we will have is, some of this discussion about the sidewalk bucket, and there are a couple of buckets, and then there will be some flexibility there, and we will propose segments to council as that money starts to roll in.
Well, as we head through the bond sales and all of that, and you begin to identify where your savings, I mean, I don't know if you still have money left from that last bond measure, but will there be the opportunity to create new buckets if you wanted to? And I'm thinking of the bicycle paths or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, say 10 years or 8 years from now, there is a change in demand or more demand or counselors demand additional spending. Will that be possible inside of this bond measure?
I would say so, that there's money left over, and council wants to do other, we're going to deliver the projects that are on the bond.
Right.
But once there's money left over, and again, some of that is just luck, then as long as it's capital projects that are what the bond councils have told us in the past is it has to fit within sort of the sideboards of the overall, and in this case, it's a multi-purpose bond. So as long as it's fitting within the sideboards of this multi-purpose bond, future councils could do all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Couldn't operate. Right? Can't operate the library we're building.
No, I know. No, I'm thinking of those different kinds of capital projects, but I'm trying to think of how much did we have left over essentially in this kind of category from the transportation bond of whatever it's been now, 15, 16 years ago.
Millions. I can recall that the Commercial Street Bridge alone was estimated at like 12 million, and it got built for 8.
Okay,
So that was, and there were a number of other examples like that. So we really were able to do a lot of projects, and that's why the bond lasted so long. The proceeds from the bond lasted so long because we just hit it at a great time. But that was just, some of that is just luck.
yeah. Okay. Counselor Stapleton?
Yeah, thank you. And Peter, this question is probably for you. I know that there are a lot of really amazing projects in this list, and most of them have bike lanes and protected bike lanes at that included in them. Will there, and is there, what I would like to see is a bucket that is for additional bike lanes from the projects that we already have listed. Because I know that, 8 years, that's a long time to wait when we have climate action goals. And, you can build it and people will come, right? And people are not going to jump on their bikes when it's not connected and it doesn't feel safe or comfortable. I'm one of those people who are very interested, but really, really concerned. My husband says, I don't want a single parent, honey. So no, you can't ride a bike in Salem because I need you alive, right? So for me, I want to make sure that this is included in the bond, that there's money set aside for them. And I don't think it's one of those things that should be put in the leftover category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what, the committee's picking. So that's, my only concern with a bucket for, if we're just talking about bike facilities and we don't really say what they are, where the staff would go to make a recommendation, and I think where the community would have us go is to the bicycle element in the TSP, and because those are the ones that are adopted and have been through a public process. So, and my other concern would be that if we just say bike facilities, most bike facilities are, unless it's like the bike friendly, like Maple, the Winter Maple bike facility, which has already been reviewed and adopted. Anything that's on the street that requires a street widening, then one project could eat up all of that. You could do that, but just be aware that if we're talking about a buffered bike lane in a location that might eat up a good chunk of that, because it's not, we're talking about more than striping in many cases. So that'd be the balancer.
Counselor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel like you guys are saying kind of the same thing, but you're not connecting. As I understand it, we have bike lane money in several of these projects. They're just not called out specifically in their own bike lane category. Yeah. But there are a number of bike lanes if you go through the projects. Am I mistaken there, or
you are not?
I mean, they're just not standalone. They're not separate. They're included within. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what you're asking for, Virginia, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yes and no. I mean, I really am excited about a lot of the projects that are on here because they do address the things that I'm really passionate about and concerned about as we move forward. But a lot of, Salem is missing those little links of a block here or 2 blocks there to really make it a connected network. And so for me, I would love to see that bucket be spent on things like that, like, okay, we've got, the Broadway project is down on the list. But then there's a couple of blocks there where there's, to get that connection. I would love to see some money set aside for those kind of contingency things on how do we take these great individual projects and link them all together so that it's a connected network.
I have a question then, Peter, on what Virginia's saying. How long would it take us then? What's our timeline on essentially meeting goal 1 requirements as well as the transportation system plan requirement and as part of the R Salem in order to make these eligible for this kind of program?
Right. So I kind of, I think we're talking about a couple of different things. So if we're talking about setting aside money for system completion, right? So hey, there's a block missing here and a block missing there. Then that's one thing, and that can certainly, that can be done very quickly. on the assumption that those projects are still are already identified in the transportation plan, right? So we're just missing a block and a block there, and I think that's the whole. We look for opportunities like that, and bonds are great things for opportunities like that. If we're talking about implementing long stretches of buffered bike lanes, which is what I was talking about earlier, then if there's a bucket, the first stop has to be the TSP. If there are projects that the council would like to do with that bucket that are not in the TSP, then we would have to go through some kind of public process to get that approved first, get the TSP amended first, and then put it in the CIP and stuff. We just know that there'd be money available because it would be from this bucket. But just having a bucket identified doesn't you can't skip the process of having the project identified, reviewed and identified in the transportation plan.
Hey, Councillor Stapleton.
So just to clarify, and I understand that it kind of feels like what's coming first, the chicken or the egg here. So if folks wanted to go for a big project like that, I would go about advocating for that by one, getting a bucket of money set aside, and then two, going and trying to get council to come rally around this cause and get it put in the TSP and go through the public process, knowing that the funds were already set aside. Am I hearing you right?
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that order. That is not the order we have typically done it in. But what you are suggesting is not incorrect.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. What else do we have, Josh? Anything else?
Just open discussion for the committee if you'd like to move any pieces of this or add anything.
Hey, Councillor Barney.
Thank you. I've been reading through the details on the project list, and one question I have is there anything in here about pedestrian crossing from Parkway over to Orchard Heights Park? Because that's a real problem area. I know it's on the future list, but I didn't see it listed in here specifically.
We do.
Well, go ahead, Brian, and then I see Julie. Julie, I think, has a thought on it as well.
Yeah, we do have a budgeted project that's partially budgeted in the CIP to provide the pedestrian crossing that you're talking about to get folks from the south side of Orchard Heights to Orchard Heights Park. So that is a project that we have partially funded now for design, and we also have planned funds in the CIP so that we can actually complete construction ultimately in a few years.
Okay, because the one that's listed in the bond is the one on the other side and a crossing up at Chapman Hill, and which is not needed as badly as the other one right now. So that's why I was asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, to maybe get us started, I'll go ahead and move the staff memo as a staff recommendation, so we can get that on the table and start talking about something more specific. Does that work for everybody? Okay, give me a second then.
Second.
Who's giving me a second?
I seconded it.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, so what we have on the table then is the staff recommendation, all the stuff Josh just took us through, kind of some of the discussion, our understanding of where we are if we proceed with this. And this is in addition of what we brought on to the ballot measure last meeting. So this balances us out with the whatever it was that brings us to $300 million. So there's our balanced number that does not raise tax rates. Okay, Chris?
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to clarify, make sure my understanding is solid.
Okay.
So we're let's say we did this, put that package forward. We got the final $300 million list. We're going to send that to council. They're going to say, yeah, we're comfortable with it. And then we're going to go research it. And then this committee is going to have a chance to make some adjustments around the edges. Is my understanding correct?
That's my understanding. Josh, are we in the same page here?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
The strategy may be to present the recommendation in a work session.
Right.
And that would be the easiest way to talk about this level of detail that they may have interest in. But if you prefer, we could just put it on as a recommendation from the committee.
Just a thought. I just wonder about bringing it as a recommendation from the committee. So, and essentially as a public hearing, let the public comment on it, but then let the council take a real close look at it. I don't know. I'm not sure the difference. There's much of a difference there, except you're giving us more time to talk about it in a work session, I think and that has a real appeal to it. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you. I guess my thought is to have a work session, but if staff is willing to do the individual meetings with the 4 remaining counselors, so they have some quality time to really get into the detail, that would be fine with me. But they're going to need more than just an agenda item to understand this. I mean, they're going to need an in-depth conversation, because look at all the meetings we've had and we're barely understanding it. So I would assume that they're going to need a similar, some similar explanation.
Okay, well then let's just plan on this. We'll go to a work session at a time to be determined. I'd like to know, Courtney, that work session would allow for public comment. I think trying to keep the public as engaged as we can. We're going to probably get the same 5 people we've been getting, but we may get some more and get some more thoughts on this, which I think is very helpful. So can you do that? And we'll look at it in sometime in early May.
Yes, May 16th is our best opportunity.
Okay, so
it happens to be a Monday that we reserve for work sessions, and certainly it is the council's prerogative to accept public testimony in those meetings.
Great. Okay, so we'll look at this coming to us then on May 16th with a good solid staff report kind of explaining what's happened here, what this looks like. And then we'll have, and between now and then, Kristen, there'll be meetings with the 4 individuals that have not been party to this. Is that correct?
Yes, we can schedule those.
Okay, and you may want to meet with members of this committee that would like to go over this again too, just to make sure they're comfortable with where we're headed.
Sure.
Or not.
We can do that. Whoever's interested.
Very good. Okay. Is there any? Yes, Councilor Stapleton.
Will we have time now to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts a little bit before we vote on what moves forward? Is that the plan?
Sure. Yeah. Now's for discussion. You bet.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the money we have set aside for land to buy for fire stations? That was something interesting that came up in the feedback that was provided to us today from the different surveys. And so I would like to talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think we've set aside 14 million for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know kind of how other counselors are reading that information.
It's 14 million to buy land for fire stations. I think it's mainly to meet the needs for the community, is how I understood it, that in order to meet their response times and all that. Niblock knows. Let's hear him.
Yeah, I do understand why it's on there.
Well, I thought that's what you were asking.
Well, I'm just wondering.
Why don't you ask Niblock the question? Let's see what his answer is. I'm not sure I understood it then.
Okay, I guess, Chief, I do really appreciate your opinion. I was actually hoping to hear from the other members, the council members, just about their read on that feedback as far as how it's being presented and understood by the general public within, the question of, would you want to vote for a bond that has this on there? That was my question.
Well, have we still got John here? John may be the right person to ask that question as to what it meant.
If I could take a run at it first, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. I guess, Virginia, to answer your question, my take on it is similar to the seismic upgrade for the Civic Center.
Yeah.
Sometimes that we have information that the public doesn't have, and we have to make decisions for the whole public good that they may not be understand as the public good. You know, like we have response time needs in certain areas of town, and really the only way to effectively address those would be to increase the fire stations in certain locations. And so even though it's not super popular, maybe not something that we want to put at the top of the advertisement that we do to when we try to pass this thing, it's still something that's important and something that we kind of have a duty to put on there in terms of public safety. That's my read on it. So
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
That's
That was
helpful.
really good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's what I was trying to get at. I want to know how other counselors and members of the voting group here is feeling about that and wanting to move forward on it or not.
Yeah, I think
The other
Chris
thing,
hit it right on the nose.
the other thing that I would add is we are this 14 million is just not for the property purchase; it's for the construction of 2 fire stations as well. So we've kind of labeled it as property purchase, but it's really about the facilities to better serve the community and assist in achieving response times in areas of town where we don't serve the community like we'd like to.
yeah, and I think that's an important point,
Good
Chief. And
point.
we need to start labeling it as such, and not just property purchase, because it's really for 2 new fire stations. It's an all-encompassing package for 2 new stations, which it's not really property at all. That's part of it. And I think,
really
Josh, it
good.
would be helpful. It would be helpful if you shared with the rest of the group, if you haven't, the information you shared with me about the research you did on property potential that we may already own or not own that could be available. I just think that's good information for everybody to know.
Yeah, the short answer for if there's land that we already own that we could place these stations on, the answer is no. And that's the simple answer. So in those areas, we don't have property that we can use.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up, Chief, that also included the buildings. I don't know why I was sitting here thinking, geez, that's expensive land, but oh well. That's very helpful. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes, Councilor Barney.
Yeah, that was an excellent clarification because that's one of my questions.
Yeah.
What sort of a timeline would there be for the construction of the fire stations? And in the meantime, could the property, once we purchased it, be used for other things temporarily?
So timeline wise, that's a little more vague because if you construct a station, then you have to staff that station with employees. And so, and up until we have additional revenue available to be able to staff a fire station, we wouldn't construct one. As far as using the property for something else, I don't know what that possibly could be, but if we owned it or if we were able to identify ahead of time, hey, this is the best location for a fire station and purchase the property in advance. And let's say we had to wait 5 years until we had the revenue to be able to construct it. This is a 10-year look. So just, we know we're going to need at least 2 more stations in the next 10 years to be able to serve the community. So it's just kind of a planning tool, if you will. We have no intention of, we need to buy our trucks immediately. We do not, while we could certainly use these stations, we don't have the revenue to staff them. So building a station and not staffing it really isn't a good thing to do. We've experienced that in the past with Station 11 a little bit. So we don't want to repeat that exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. I have a couple of different questions. Kristen, I think this one is for you. Can you talk to me a little bit about the affordable housing bucket that we have? How many projects will that money be? And I know this is might be hard to answer, but how many projects will that money be able to help us get into construction and into use? And then could you also talk to me about the branch library? I know that this is an intricate part of this, but is it my understanding that there's money in here for 2 branch libraries and not just 1? And then what's your thinking with that there?
So what we're looking at here is an acquisition development bucket and more of an opportunity fund for affordable housing. So speaking to the affordable housing alone bucket, We often, as we partner with nonprofit developers, private developers, the housing authority, when it comes to doing affordable housing development, often encounter projects that have a gap somewhere $1 to $3 million, where there's just extra funding that's needed to get it launched and built. So, we're thinking that with these funds, depending on what those gaps are, and if we want to put a limit on how much we would help, if we wanted to say this could contribute 1 million or 2 million to a project, but have a guideline or standard around it, it could perhaps help, anywhere from 4 to 6 projects come to fruition by helping to fill that gap.
Okay. Sorry.
And the other piece, if you want me to speak about the other part of the question, are you ready to move off of this piece?
Well, I did have a question about the 4 to 6 projects. I'm just trying to help myself gain knowledge so that I can talk to people in the community about this. So when we say 4 to 6 projects, could we get an estimate on how many units we're talking about? That's what people understand in the community, right? When we say this bond is going to help us get X many, an estimate of this many housing opportunities for people, that is how people are going to understand this. And I'm hoping you have that answer.
That is really hard to say, because we wouldn't know until a development project comes to us and asks for assistance. And it could be a 100-unit project. It could be a 300-unit project. It just depends on where the development is, what the design is. That's not something that we can really estimate, because it's driven by too many other factors tied to land availability and many other things.
Okay. Thank you. I do have.
I would say that you could perhaps set a minimum threshold that this is available for projects that are over 100 units, something like that. And then you could at least, come up with a minimum number.
Sure. Yeah, that would help too. I guess my question now is kind of leading down the path of Salem Housing Authority. And I know, when you talk to Nicole Utz about the projects that they have lined up just on their horizon, I think all of this money could just go straight to them to get those projects all completed. But I'm just trying to figure that one out. How do I talk to people about that?
As we've talked about this internally, we see a big benefit in using these funds as leverage and filling a gap. If you put it all in one, you could do one project, maybe 1.5 projects with those available resources, or you could leverage several projects. So we think that there you get more value out of the funds if you're making it available to leverage not just housing authority projects, but others. There is a great deal of funding out there, federal and state funding and tax credits to help form the primary funding for projects. Where we see projects running into problems is the surprises that come up. Sure. Cost escalation, some, crazy environmental factor that comes up that has to be mitigated that wasn't originally anticipated, those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you. Now, could you talk to me about libraries?
Yeah, so libraries, our past discussions of the community recommendation or ask was for 2 branch libraries. So as a second affordable housing component, then we're looking at 2 sites for acquisition for libraries with affordable housing as a component of the development, or affordable housing with libraries as a component of the development, because it's likely that the affordable housing piece would be completed first. And then the library space, while it could be constructed, it may take some time before there's funding to open and operate those libraries. So 2, just reflecting what we heard in the community, with funding to move forward with pre-development for one of those facilities.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, are you ready then to forward this to council for the work session and we'll
Can I
continue
request
on?
a quick 5-minute break real quick?
Yeah. We'll break for 5 minutes.